Then King Arthur came out of his tower, and had under his gown a gesseron of double mail, and there went with him the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Sir Baldwin of Britain, and Sir Kay, and Sir Brastias. These were the men of most worship that were with him, and when they were met there was no meekness, but stout words on both sides. As we left off in the previous entry of this series, we saw several kings reject the rule of Arthur, and that these kings take up arms against him, for they see him as nothing more but an illegitimate boy, a bastard of the previous King Uther Pendragon. Some don't even give him that honour, and believe that Arthur is a nobody, merely a puppet installed upon the throne by Merlin, yet another character who comes under defamation. They call Merlin a witch, implying that he is using some sort of black magic to manipulate the minds of others, and that he has used this magic to pull the wool over the eyes of the Archbishop. By this, they deem Merlin as a dubious character, and many of these self-proclaimed kings deny the magic of the sword in the stone, and believe it to be nothing more than a well-orchestrated trick. Amongst these kings appears to be the main instigator, King Lot, and it is this king who becomes Arthur's main antagonist during the ensuing wars for the kingdom. Merlin's attempts to convince King Lot and the other kings that Arthur is indeed the one true king only riles them up more and more. They demand for Arthur to be brought before them so that they might chastise him to his face. We see Merlin urge Arthur to confront them, for he is their king, but he assures Arthur that no harm can come to him, for he is mightier than they. As a show of strength, Arthur strolls out to meet King Lot and the other angry kings, wearing a full body of armour. He's also flanked by the Archbishop of Canterbury, a symbol of the church, almost implying that Arthur had God on his side, and the backing of the church. Also assembled alongside him are his knights, Sir Baldwin of Britain, Sir Kay, and Sir Brastias, and we are told that these were no meek men, but knights of the utmost sternness. Here we see Arthur as this mere boy has already formed this formidable entourage, both in physical strength, but also in political strength as well, given that the Archbishop seems to be very much in his favour. In a time where religion was so heavily practiced and faith in God was a highly regarded virtue, you probably couldn't have asked for a more powerful ally in the Archbishop, who certainly had influence amongst the people and would have earned Arthur many supporters. When Arthur confronts King Lot, we are told that both sides exchange heated words. To his credit, Arthur doesn't back down, and this is one of the very first moments where we see his noble character shine. In fact, it is never actually documented that Arthur had actually taken place in a joust, or even a physical confrontation for that matter, and yet he rises to the occasion with steely conviction and the utmost bravery. He does not shy away from King Lot, a far older and more experienced man that would have been surely intimidating and robust. But instead he answers his and the other kings' accusations and tells them that they will bow. It's a mightily bold thing to say, and yet Arthur doesn't hesitate. Again, this is a young man who had just stepped into his role as king, and yet he carries himself with an almost godly aura, in that he appears to already know the outcome of the confrontation. Perhaps this is Merlin's doing, goading him and hyping him up behind the scenes to be the king that England needs. Or maybe this is an innate thing that Arthur had acquired from Uther Pendragon as he stands up to King Lot. King Lot and the other kings depart with wrath. Evidently, they do not get the answers they seek, and do not get the outcome they had hoped for. Admittedly, it might even be that they left because they saw something in Arthur that made them second guess themselves, and this is made even more possible by the way Arthur bids them to keep well, something that they themselves reciprocate. If anything, Arthur may have gained their respect through his confidence and willingness to come out of his tower and face them head on, as opposed to allowing Merlin to do the talking for him, which seemed to be the case up until now. But Arthur doesn't take the reciprocation of respect to mean that he has heard the last of King Lot and the other kings. He is immediately seen to start arming his knights, and is likely very well aware that this confrontation was only a prelude to a much bigger and bloodier altercation. Merlin is seen to give counsel to King Lot telling him that even if he had 10 times the number he does, he would still be crushed by Arthur in battle. Some might say this is genuine advice, given from one wise man to one not so wise, but others see Merlin here as more dubious, and may even side with King Lot, in that Merlin is playing mind games. You might say that Merlin is planting the seed of defeat in King Lot, forcing him to face a very real possibility that should he take arms against Arthur, he will lose regardless. But King Lot pays this no mind, and proceeds to offend Merlin again, telling him that he is not afraid of Arthur, and certainly not afraid of a dream reader like Merlin. With that, Merlin storms off. Although, interestingly, Mallory describes Merlin as vanishing away. Whether or not he actually vanished before King Lot's eyes is not known here, but it certainly would have made a statement nonetheless. Not only would he have proved his power to King Lot, and made him feel pretty foolish for assuming Merlin was a dream reader and a trickster, but it would also suggest how much power he can offer Arthur in battle if he is able to vanish just like that. That seed of defeat would have been fertilized in that moment, and King Lot would have likely left the scene feeling tremendously unconfident about facing Arthur if Merlin was in his corner. But in any case, King Lot is not dissuaded from his endeavour, and perhaps if Merlin had vanished before his eyes, he did not take it seriously, or maybe didn't quite believe it. Merlin is evidently offended by King Lot. The Dream Reader comment seems to really bug him, for he approaches Arthur immediately afterwards and tells him to attack King Lot and his men with the utmost ferocity. Here we can begin to question Merlin's motivations. Is he actually this benign wizard who has only Arthur and the kingdom's best interest at heart? Or is he actually far more sinister? He only asks Arthur to attack King Lot so vehemently after he has been insulted. Before that, he was quite content to pacify the quarrel. By this part in the story though, his stance changes, and King Lot appears to be the catalyst that sets this in motion. Perhaps you might say that Merlin's sudden change in character is a result of his realization that there can only be one way to settle the feud between King Lot and Arthur, and that's through a war. But it's also interesting to consider that maybe Merlin is the puppeteer that King Lot implies he is, and maybe Merlin is this grand trickster, one who is far more ambitious and cunning than we are led to believe. You might also say that Merlin's character is quite insidious here, in that he encourages Arthur to use excessive force to slay his enemies, for in actuality, they are Merlin's enemies, in that they have disrespected him by referring to him as a witch and a dream reader. Whilst Arthur responds to the call for battle because of his duty as king, you might say Merlin responds out of his own personal wrath. In any case, Arthur is able to put together an army of 300 knights, most of which defected from the kings who sided with Lot. Once more, Merlin counsels Arthur and reminds him of the sword in the stone, telling him that he shouldn't use it unless the battle tips in King Lot's favour. Here, Merlin proves to be even more suspicious, because evidently, he knows more about the sword than he is letting on. We still aren't told here how the sword had even manifested, but clearly Merlin is privy to some of its characteristics, those that he does not share with Arthur. He tells him that should he need to draw the sword, then with it, he should do his best in slaying King Lot's men. Arthur rides into battle alongside Sir Baldwin, his stepbrother Sir Kay, and Sir Brastias, and we are told that this charge into the battlefield was a glorious one. Whilst the specifics of the skirmish are not detailed, we are told that King Arthur was never seen without a sword in his hand, and that he did marvellous feats on the battlefield, all of which were celebrated by his men, furthermore boosting their own morale and decreasing that of his enemies. Basically, he killed a lot of people. But King Lot would not be dissuaded by Arthur's valiantness. We are told that he and his 100 knights, alongside the King Carados, managed to flank Arthur and surprise him from the rear. Arthur is able to meet these two kings head-on in battle, and doesn't shy away, even in the slightest. He is described as being in the foremost press of the bevy, and this gives even more rise to how patriotic and how noble Arthur was, that he fought on the front lines alongside his men, and not commanding from a distance. It's true here that Arthur doesn't get his men to do anything that he isn't willing to do himself. a virtue that many kings would not have adhered to, for the danger it put them in. But misfortune strikes when Arthur's horse is slain, and Arthur is knocked to the ground by King Lot. In the madness of the battle, Arthur's knights save him and are able to get him back onto another horse, furthermore showing the level of commitment that his knights have to him, and that to them, he's their king, whether Lot and the others dispute this or not. Realising that the battle is looking grim, Arthur takes Merlin's advice and draws forth the sword, and the light from the sword is so bright that it blinds his enemies. With this distraction, Arthur and his knights drive King Lot and his 100 knights back. Interestingly, we are also told that the commoners of Carlion rose up too in this moment, after seeing Arthur's magnificence, and that they took staves and clubs to King Lot's knights and beat them back as well. Here we see more of how great a King Arthur is, in that he is able to inspire even the civilians of his kingdom to take up arms. He instills in them his own courage and valour, and unifies them all into one common goal as they drive off King Lot. Arthur's kingship is so potent in this part of the story that it actually gives the commoners the will and the ability to fend off knights, those who have actually been trained to kill. Mallory even tells us that some of these commoners were able to slay the Knights of Lot, furthermore exemplifying the greatness of Arthur, that he can inspire his people to do even the impossible. Eventually, King Lot and his knights retreat, and whilst Arthur means to follow, it is Merlin who comes to counsel him once more, telling him to follow them no further. Again, we may question Merlin's motives, for earlier he seemed so keen on having Arthur kill all of King Lot's men, but at the crucial moment of their retreat, he tells Arthur to stand down. Perhaps this is because Merlin had calmed down himself since being insulted, and that in the wake of the battle, his desired outcome had been achieved. Not only was Arthur victorious, but he had rallied even the commoners to fight for him, and now beheld an even more unified Carlion, one that saw him as a hallowed king. Merlin shows mercy towards King Lot in not goading Arthur into chasing him down and finishing him off, and in this, it keeps us wondering what King Lot will do next. But unfortunately, that is all we have time for on today's episode of Arthurian Legend. As always guys, if you're enjoying this series, then do let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. More adventures of Arthur are on the way as I plough through Sir Thomas Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur, so stay tuned and I'll see you next time.